Good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Sharp, and I'm with Kemm, as you can see, and we're going to talk about the Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Program today. But the topic is really broader than that today, I must say, and we'll keep this very informal because we have a small, intimate crowd. But it's really more about just not the Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Program, but it's also about just navigating around offshore tax hazards. Because whether you're helping a bona fide, fully compliant international investor staying abreast with and in compliance with the law, or you're helping someone get out of deep yogurt because of prior sins, either way, we've got a lot of rules to navigate around. I was actually hopeful today that I'd have a new piece that I've just authored that's publishing in Lee's publication, in fact, Tax Notes International. This comes out next Monday. This is proof of the, you can get a shot of it, guys. This is proof of the galley. It went to Doug Smith and Kathy Phillips yesterday. And it's about an 11-page article on how do we navigate these hazards. There's certainly a confluence of different events going on here. And we're going to discuss those today in a very informal setting, but we're going to focus on practical and technical aspects too, to give you kind of a full shot of what's happening in the offshore world and what you can do to navigate around those hazards and maximize the opportunities. That's kind of the cup of tea here today. But let's move on into the further comments on the introduction. There's no question that the U.S. government is aggressively enhancing its efforts to eradicate offshore tax abuse and dismantle bank secrecy. But the yin and the yang here, this flip side of that is the U.S. is also seeking for compliant American abroad and also compliant non-American inbound to the U.S. to further enhance its regulation, disclosure, reporting, and really taxation of those properly reported transactions. We see that across the board. And it's clearly a cooperative undertaking involving a cross-border bilateral and multilateral effort. We see that in many sectors. But we've got to take a step back and ask ourselves, what are the key drivers here? What's driving all this? Because 10 years ago, someone would come into the office and say, gee, do I need to worry about this Cayman account? And of course, we would not advise them not to become compliant. But if they walked away and didn't become compliant, chances are they weren't in too bad a shape, although it was 10 years plus ago that we had the new tax information exchange agreement entered into between Grand Cayman and the Cayman Islands and the U.S. in actually November of 2001, just after 9/11. But anyway, there's a cooperative effort going on, and we see that even in some private sector, public sector organizations. But, what are the key drivers? Because there are a lot of, it's just not OVDP. We hear about OVDP all the time, but it's a confluence of many, many factors, including, of course, FATCA. We've all heard about FATCA. We're sick of FATCA. We're tired of hearing about FATCA. And many of us thought FATCA would not actually come to fruition. But actually it has come to fruition, slipped into Congress in March of 2010, no hearings, no real debate, no markups. It just kind of slipped in as an attachment to some bill, some archaic, important bill back in 2010 March. And it is becoming effective January 1st, 2014, as many of you have read. So we have FATCA as a major driver. And in fact, in one case, and I'm a little nomadic because under my Swiss visa, I spend about a third of my year in Switzerland, a third on the West Coast, and a third on the Florida coast. And we have an office in San Francisco as well, and I have a home there. But the real driver we're hearing now, and this is from the streets of Zurich, is that some banks today are saying, we're going to start disclosing in June or July. And I'm taking a step back and wait a minute. You've got to worry about Swiss law. You just can't give away American customer details to the U.S. government without going through a certain process, and we'll talk about that more. But clearly, the banks and the fiduciaries in the Swiss and Liechtenstein terrains are not yet ready for FATCA. Some of them are getting ready, but it's going to happen January 1st, 2014. Just like we all thought the millennium might not happen. Remember those days? All your data's going to crash and the world's going to end, this sort of thing. But really, FATCA is going to happen. Now, in addition, another key driver is what I call this in perpetuity, series of offshore voluntary disclosure formal programs. Now, people said this is the third one we have in 2012. We have one in 11 and 9, but that's not correct. We actually had one OVIC in 2003. Okay, we had the 2003 program. Only about 1,000 people came in on that program. Under the current vintages, the 09, 11, and 12 program, we have about 39,000 people coming in, generating in excess of $6 billion of collections. Not too bad of a payday. And believe me, this has become an institutionalized effort of the IRS and DOJ. And we'll comment further why it's probably not in perpetuity, but it will go on for a long time because there have been major campuses established in Philadelphia and Austin, There are major opt-out centers, and we'll talk about opting out today, being established in other key markets from Milwaukee to Kansas City to Southern California. And those pockets of expertise, these are buildings with people, with leases. I mean, they're not going to go away tomorrow. There's a definite parallel between FATCA and the 2012 OVDP. They're kind of riding together. So look to OVDP. This is my prediction, crystal ball, probably wrong, but OVDP will probably be around until at least 2016-17 as FATCA comes into the realm. Okay? And by the way, FATCA just alone in Switzerland will affect at least 200 to 300 banks, as we've been reading about, both the Tier 1, Tier 2, and potentially Tier 3 banks. But we won't get too bogged down in it. We're still in the introduction. So continuing on in the introduction, and again, these are the drivers. We still have the so-called quiet program, and the quiet program is an ability to become compliant, not through the formal program, but through the IRS voluntary disclosure practice, and we'll talk about that. Another key driver is the recently formalized streamlined programs. We have about 7 million Americans living abroad. Many of them don't file. There are less than 1 million FBARs filed every year. And we're going to talk about this program and how important it is and how successful it's been to date so far. We've gotten a lot of informal scoop from some of our contacts with the government to illustrate how important this streamlined compliance program is. And then also we have a number of key domestic and foreign law and regulatory developments. From Luxembourg to Austria to the US to Treasury, we're seeing many developments that are all going toward attacking bank secrecy, making the world more flat and more transparent. And we're also seeing a continuing steady drip of proactive attacks by both the US and many partnering governments. We see the DOJ very active. We see the French, German tax authorities, the UK tax authorities with its list initiative. This is not going away tomorrow. And in particular, under the DOJ side, we see, of course, grand jury subpoenas and John Doe summons. We have one filed just on the West Coast implicating one of the Caribbean-based banks, First Caribbean, just recently. And we're also seeing, which I thought I'd never live to see, really new and improved cross